welcome to my library. If you're new here, hello, my name is Chinsia, and if you're not new here, today we are going down the road of Lilith, the much requested Lilith. There was a lot for me to cover here, so I can only apologise. I've gathered information that I think would be most, but there was a lot. Fun. I don't know how else do you describe this? Fun. For nearly 2 millennia, according to legends recorded in the Babylonian Talmud, Lilith was Adam's. Her beauty is not Medusian, because her horrors appear only after her seduction. She is a variant of the romantic doppelganger, as she manifests the desires of those she seeks to control. To the romantic writers of the 19th century, Lilith represented a source of evil that destroyed those who came under her spell. Much like the sirens, men feared and loved her, but the only way to preserve humanity was to turn away from her enchanting allure. As McGillis writes, Lilith, aesthetic temperament indicating the complex cultural changes taking place in the 19th century. The image of the virile woman disturbed faith in rationalism and the status quo. She was the manifestation of the psyche's fear of the inverted motherly figure, the loving wife, who instead sucked the vitality from the young men and children. But to understand Lilith's evolving image from a religious figure to a demonic vampire and then to an enchantress who was symbolic of women's suffrage, we need to go back to her ancient avatars. The Hebrew Lilith originated in Lilitu, also known as Adat Lili and Kiskil Lilike. The earliest mention of the she-demon dates from around 2400 BCE and is found in the Sumerian Kings List. It states that the father of the hero Gilgamesh was a Lilu demon. The Lilu demon was one of 4 demons belonging to a vampire or incubi-succubi class. The other 3 demons were Lilitu, Lilith, a she-demon, Adat Lili, Lilith's handmaid, who visited men by night and bore them ghostly children, and Erdu Lili, who was likely her male counterpart, whose epithet was the beautiful maiden, but she was believed to be a harlot and a vampire, who— "Oh, my baby, what? Oh, cute! Why did you make that noise? How cute!" Right, let's stop there. Someone just wanted to cuddle, so I'm getting kisses. I'm getting kisses. I love you so much. Anyway, where were we? Oh, that's right. Anyway, the Sumerian Lilith, or Lilitu, was recorded as being barren and unable to produce milk. According to the Sumerian epic Gilgamesh, dating from around 2000 BCE, Lilith, or Lilake in this case, built her house in the Hulupu willow tree, which had been planted on the bank of the Euphrates in the days of creation. According to the story, a dragon set up its nest at the base of the tree, and the zoo bird placed his children in its crown. Gilgamesh kills the dragon with a bronze axe, whereupon the zoo bird flees with his children to the mountain, and Lilith, traumatized, tears down her house and runs to the desert. Ionian terracotta relief, believed to date to around the same time as the poem, has been argued by some scholars to depict Lilith as a beautiful nude woman with wings and owl's feet, and she adorns a cap on her head embellished with horns whilst holding a ring and rod. This relief doesn't depict a demon at all, but rather a goddess surrounded by wild animals she evidently tamed. Again, reading of the relief isn't set in stone. Haha, as there are some who argue that it depicts Ishtar and others that it depicts Ereshkigal, the Empire and the New Babylonian Kingdom. What's important about these is that they show that the myth of Lilith in the 8th century has all the major features that were employed 2,000 years later by Kabbalistic Judaism, as Lilith's place of rest harks back to the Sumerian Gilgamesh extract of her running into the desert. Know most about today comes from the nefarious stories that were written about her during the Talmudic period of Ben Sirah, and this is the first time we hear of her being the first Eve. Observations conducted by the University of Pennsylvania brought to life several dozen bowls inscribed with magical texts directed against Lilith, or Liliths. The bowls, dating circa 600 CE, were 100 years old. Incantations date back much further. According to the Bowls, Lilith was clearly seen as a danger to women, found Lilith an incredibly significant figure. Remember, the Romantics and the writers that followed in the period, which were known as the Decadent, loved writing about the femme fatale, the effects of her cruel and diabolical beauty, seduction, and the various other vices, and served as a perfect primer for the enigmatic female creature. The pre-Raphaelite Dante Rossetti was fascinated by Lilith. In his poem Eden Bower, he tells the tale of the fall of man as engineered by Lilith. In this version, Lilith was originally a serpent, reshaped by God into a human to form a bride for Adam. However, Milton's description of Lilith many familiar figures. He describes her as being half woman and half snake, which is the same description that many actually still ascribe to Medusa, such as in Ray Harryhausen's films. This also directly reflects Michelangelo's depiction of Lilith on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. The hellhounds around her waist are, as Milton stresses, directly inspired by Scylla, the nymph-turned-monster who was transformed by Circe into a horrifying sea creature 12 feet in height with 6 heads on long snaky necks with triple rows of shark-like teeth and loins girdled with the heads of baying dogs. Milton's tone is rather comic, but MacDonald's Lilith figure is also plagued by her own evil, manifested in a dark spot on her side. George MacDonald's allegorical romance from 1895 called Lilith overtly makes Lilith a vampire, succuba and witch. In the story, the protagonist, Mr. Vane, owns a library haunted by an old librarian called Mr. Raven, who worked for Mr. Vane's great-great-grandfather, Sir Upward Vane. The ghost, Mr. Raven, takes Mr. Vane to another world, where he meets Lilith, and the meeting goes as such. She was beautiful, but with such pride at once and misery on her countenance that I could hardly believe what yet I saw. Up and down she walked, vain of the mist and rapid around her. The eyes in the beautiful face were dead, and on her left side was a dark spot, against which she would now and then press her hand as if to stifle. Lilith with Satan is seen again, part 1. When Lilith appears, the temptress frightens Mephistopheles, who warns Faust, "Beware of her hair, for she excels all women in the magic of her locks, and when she winds them round a young man's neck, she will not ever set him free again." Faust meets Lilith at what is possibly his lowest point, when he is completely given to sensuality, to give him his vision of Margaret, a beautiful innocent young woman with whom he falls madly in love with, but whom Mephistopheles deliberately confuses with Medusa. Victim Medusa stands in opposition to Lilith, who threatens man's virility. Medusa's beauty and honour work redemption. Lilith's beauty is a threat. Unlike Milton, who presents her as a hag, Goethe presents her, as all the others do, as an alluring representation of destruction and degradation. But now let's return to MacDonald for a bit, because he has the most complicated relationship with Lilith as a literary figure. In 1872, MacDonald used Lilith in another novel, Wilfred Cumbermead. Lilith is actually the name of the protagonist's white mare, in an ironic reference to the book's dark lady, Clara Conyngham. Clara is the Lilith of the story. Even from the age of 13, she is a seductive flirt, coy, sarcastic, patronising and unpredictable in her moods. Her love for her, and causes one to suicide, the ignominy of the other, and the success of the third, who happens to be the villain. But late in the book we learn that she has been an unwilling victim of her father's greed and lust for money and social power. Like the horse, Lilith, who is sold to the villain, Clara is the slave to a power that she detests. But suffering restores her dignity and independence of mind, and it turns out that she wasn't the Dark Lady at all, but a victim of a power controlling her. And that's how MacDonald saw Lilith. In March 1890, MacDonald reworked the book on Lilith, his romance book, for the final time, and in this version he decided to make Lilith more powerful. Lilith is a victim who claims to have ensnared the heart of the Great Shadow, so that he becomes her slave. However, she's the embodiment of primal sins, pride, self-love, envy, lust, anger and greed, all of which Vane falls victim to despite the many warnings. And, like her traditional reputation, her beauty revealed that she's actually a chimera, a figment of men's imagination. She tells Mr. Vane, "In me was every woman. I had power over the soul of ever the woman. For by his side I lay, the woman still outran. I did sing into his." MacDonald manages to convey the idea that Lilith is a projection of Vane's own desires and creates a character that functions in her own right. In MacDonald's book, we see that Lilith encourages evil in others, but she herself suffers the torture of her own evil, symbolised by the dark spot on her side. MacDonald manages to convey the action of Vane's own desires and creates a character that functions in her own right. In MacDonald's book, we see that Lilith encourages evil in others, but she herself suffers the torture of her own evil, symbolised by the dark spot on her side. Lilith symbolised everything that threatened the patriarchal world. She killed children, controlled men, and refused to lie with them as she did with Adam. Lilith was a forced slave of social convention, a beauty that is destroyed and also destructive. By the 19th century, more writers turned to presenting Lilith as a sympathetic character, which went hand in hand with the women's movement taking place at the time, and this culminated in her depiction within George Bernard Shaw's play, Back to Methuselah. In this play, Shaw transforms Lilith into a life force representative of the liberated mind, who created her own values, rather than following the status quo. Shaw's overt inversion of Lilith's demonic nature coincided with the women's suffrage movement, which had culminated just 3 years before his play. This shift in a masculine mindset and attitude towards Lilith, after centuries of demonic representation, demonstrated how the women's movement had really influenced how men viewed women, even within classical and ancient literature, and they were willing to transform and refute centuries-old depictions of them, despite the authoritative status that those depictions may have had as ancient or even religious texts. And thus concludes my video on Lilith. I hope it covered enough. I thought I'd do some literature, some ancient, all the things in between, and what she is renowned for. If there are any